Many people probably believe if you saw an individual who committed a crime, you probably never forget that face and you would be accurate in your identification. But we know from real cases that eyewitnesses routinely make errors in their identification decisions. Human memory is quite malleable.
That was Dr. Jennifer Dysart, who is an eyewitness identification expert and professor at John Jay College of Criminal Justice in New York City. Unfortunately, she couldn't make it today because we're not going to pay her to come onto our show, and we're a little lazy. Why would we call her and ask when we could just take her audio? We're going to talk about this. We're going to talk about eyewitnesses, which it's a lot shakier than we think it is, and we're going to talk about that in a second. But first, I'm Dave Rattigan. Dale Lawrence is with me. Inside the Line, real stories by real cops, and we're going to talk about some real identification stories in a minute. But before that, we had a case over the weekend in Forest Hills, which is a nice section of Queens, New York City.
There's actually nice sections in New York, Dave. I wasn't aware of that, yes, but I guess there is.
Oh, there's a lot of wealth in New York.
Oh, is it? Okay.
But yes. And in this case, this mother, who seemed to be, mother of two teenagers, horrible story, but it's there's the reboot of Law and Order, the TV series, and this is perfect for that. She was found, a dog walker found the woman's body dead in a hockey duffel bag down the street from her house, 4:30 in the morning.
They have videotape of her being kind of wheeled down the street by an unknown person. At 4:30. Then at like 8:30, the dog walker, her dog sniffed it out.
I'm sorry, the dog walker. Okay, I take it back. All right, then I got to pay more attention.
That's okay, Dave. It's okay.
But either way, the dog walker finds it on a Sunday morning, which is the typical Law and Order opening. It's just a fascinating story because we talked about this before. There are, in quote unquote, nice neighborhoods that can afford it, there are cameras at every door, and you can follow things like this. And the cops came, they followed the blood from the body back to the house. That's how they knew that's how they found out who the woman was. And now they're trying to piece together this mystery. And it honestly, I don't know, it seems like the evidence points in one direction, but it could point in another direction.
Her husband and her son
out of town
were on a recruiting trip for college.
A daughter, I think, but still.
I think it was a son. Was it a daughter?
Okay.
Oh, it was a family member.
It was a family member.
I believe it was a son. Well, what do I know? I'm just a former 32-year police officer from the mean streets of the North Shore.
Right. Oh, fine.
And then the 13-year-old son is upstairs sleeping in the bedroom, allegedly. And I guess it could have been his hockey duffel bag. They alluded to that in the newspaper.
They said it was similar to it.
Similar to it,
I
okay.
thought that was interesting.
And now maybe there's she could have met an unknown male, maybe from the neighborhood. She could have met him, and now she's screwing around on her husband. What's going on here? My first inclination, or my first two inclinations, is let's look at the husband. Maybe he wants to have his wife whacked, so he goes out of town and pays someone to do it. That's a scenario. Mm-hmm. Now, the young kid up in the bedroom, I've seen young kids, or I've known of cases where young kids have murdered their parents, so that's not beyond the realm of possibility. The kid could have stabbed his mother 60 times, put her in a duffel bag, and dragged her down the street.
Yeah.
Or is there an unknown person there? Is there an actual unknown offender that they don't know who it is? Because the caveat to this whole thing is allegedly someone used her cell phone, texted her husband, and was telling him what was going on, that he was going to kill the wife and the family is next. So it's a really bizarre murder mystery here.
Really?
Yeah, it's crazy.
It is crazy. It is crazy. I didn't know about that, the text. I knew there was
that came out just a little while ago. I just read it before you showed up a half hour late for the podcast, Dave.
Yeah.
You will be docked.
From the New York. Yeah, I'm going to get my. Anyway, the New York Post is our source on this, at least my source on it. You're right. It was one kid is on his way to, one kid was going to have his bar mitzvah.
A couple of weeks ago, yeah. It's a weird situation.
COVID. He's in the house. Somehow he supposedly isn't aware of the wife's murder, which sounds a little implausible until you consider he's a 13-year-old boy.
Yeah, like I said, it's bizarre, and I would think that just New York homicide detectives have a lot of experience with very bizarre type murders, from serial murders to kidnapping murders to everything in between. So if anyone could solve this, it would be a department like New York City, because they've had so many bizarre things like this.
And here's the other thing that I thought was interesting. There was a previous 911 call at the house after Klein reported his wife missing in 2020, and the son went missing way back in 2004.
Yeah,
now, the older son,
it sounds very bizarre. The whole family does.
He's 17 now. That's 2004, so he was a very young child.
Yeah, it just makes no sense. Yeah, it makes no sense.
Did you ever go missing when you were a young child?
Well, if I had, I know my parents wouldn't have looked for me.
my mother didn't either, as a matter of fact. I was once picked up by Beverly Police.
There you go.
Where I grew up. Beverly Police picked me up about a block and a half from my house. I was walking on I think I had one of those little fire engines, and I was driving my little fire engine.
How old were you?
I think my sister was a baby, so I was probably 3 years old.
There you go.
My mother had kids. She was tired. I might have been 5. I'm not sure what sister it was.
That gives your mother less responsibility, because now you're 5, right?
She was a terrible mother. She was horrible. But, that's what they did back then. And she basically, I was, who knows where I was playing, but I know that I just basically went for a walkabout.
There you go.
At age 4 or 3 or however old I was, maybe 5. I went for a little walkabout, and the cop, because that's how it was back then, the cop pulled over and said, "Who are you?" And
a little Davey Rattigan.
Yeah, and he basically brought me right back to Pine Road, and my mother never even, that was the first my mother knew I was gone, because that's how mothers work.
Well, nowadays, try that, and you're going to have Department of Social Services knocking on your door.
I know.
But anyway,
enough about this. Let's go to the legal definition. Of course, here's the thing. Legal definition of an eyewitness identification basically is, it's received from a witness, quote, who has actually seen an event and can so testify in court. I remember this years ago, reading about how different races weren't good at giving identification, weren't good at identifying people of other races.
Absolutely.
And there were a lot of issues with
we're gonna hit eyewitness identification head on in this podcast, and kind of give you an idea that it's probably not as accurate as you may think. And if you just throw a little stat out there, 75% of the convictions that were overturned by the Innocence Project through DNA found that person was found guilty because of an eyewitness identification.
Right.
And then 10, 15 years later, the DNA exonerated that person who was found guilty by the eyewitness.
Wow. Oh, we got a clip.
We have a funny clip.
clip.
And this kind of sets the tone of the whole podcast.
Yeah, because there's nothing funnier than false arrest.
There you go.
And conviction.
I'm Officer Tamarant. I need to get a description from you, and it's only going to take us a few minutes, all righty?
I saw everything, okay.
Oh, great. Great. Can you describe the perpetrator to me, ma'am?
Yeah, he looked like a man.
Okay, he was a man.
Yeah,
Okay.
everything I tell you I saw.
Good. Was he a tall man or a short man?
Yeah, no.
Yes, he was a tall man, and
Okay.
no, he wasn't a short man?
No, yeah, everything I saw, everything.
Well, Dave, believe it or not, I've done a lot of eyewitness crimes and investigations, and absolutely, that is 100% correct. How that lady described an incident that she saw, or a perpetrator that she saw.
Yeah, I bet that happens all the time. I mean,
more than you would think.
I think more than you think if you watch television and you listen to if you read the paper and you listen to the TV news and you watch television cop shows, you would think, of course we remember, and we don't. And it's somebody who's big, somebody who's small, somebody who seems big because they're punching you may not actually be. John Stamos, I'm going to drop a line.
Yes, okay.
John Stamos, the actor, he used to play with the Beach Boys. I opened for the Beach Boys down at Cape Cod, so we're not hanging out, but we're in the same room.
Hey, you're dropping names, Dave. You're good at that.
I am. So you would think that I would remember what he looked like, right?
Yeah.
Now I could pick him out of a lineup. Is he got gray hair now, or did he have black hair, or was it dark brown? Here's my point. Somebody just asked me. They said, how tall was he? Now I sat there standing next to him, eating, and we were just chatting while we were eating in between shows. I think he's tall, but I don't know. He could be 5'10". He could have been taller. He could have been the same height. I just don't know. And here's a guy who's famous, who you would think I would remember that.
Yeah. Well, guess what, Dave? You are the stereotypical bad witness of an eyewitness identification.
That'd be horrible.
And there's a lot of issues.
Then I saw him take out the gun and shoot him. He was stabbed. And after
do you want to know what some of the issues are, Dave?
Yeah, I do.
Every once in a while, Dave rambles on. Back in the 70s when he was in school, they didn't diagnose ADHD and all those other disorders. But if Dave was a kid in high school right now, he would be the poster child for ADHD and all those other things. Lack of focus.
Oh, what are you talking about?
I'm just kidding, Dave.
What are you talking about?
All right, so one of the first issues is going to be witness duress, meaning you see a violent act and you're so afraid or you're so nervous because you've never been in that situation before that you may see the person within 5 feet of you. But under duress, under stress, you just black out and you get tunnel vision and you can't describe anything.
Yeah.
Under duress. So people can't concentrate. So you would think you're a witness, Dave. Someone pulls a weapon on you and you're a witness. They steal your car or they take all your earnings from a night of comedy. You would think you'd be able to identify them, wouldn't you?
Yes.
But under duress, one of the main reasons why under duress you can't do it. And when you put a weapon into the equation, a gun or a knife, that's going to make it even harder.
Well, they've done this. I've seen this done on TV on a show called Brain Games, where they took some people out and they staged a robbery right in front of them, and they talked to the witnesses individually, and they got conflicting stories. And I think that's why you're seeing something you don't see. There's an element of danger, and it can happen.
As a cop, myself, my first couple of years on the department, you would go to calls like high stress calls, and you wouldn't black out, but you would get to the call and momentarily. You'd be kind of in a fog because you're not realizing I'm going to a suicide and there's someone who's decapitated, or I'm going to a bad car accident and people are trapped in the car or the car's on fire. You kind of freeze momentarily for a second until you actually kind of get used to that. Then after a few years of being in law enforcement, it becomes second nature. You're able to go to high stress calls and kind of maintain your focus. So I can see a cop doing that, so I can even see a civilian or someone who's never been in that situation but once in their life to be able to, or to be unable to give any type of description or actually an accurate description.
Can you recall cases and details from 20 and 30 years ago?
Yes, I can. A lot of times I need to be prompted on it. So if I'm sitting around a group of cops and we'll talk about stuff, and guys will bring up stories, then everything starts kind of falling into place. What the person was wearing, his nickname, his hairstyle, the type of car he was driving, and then associates and stuff like that.
Let me ask you this: do details change? Like the length of my home runs when I was 13 years old.
Yeah, it's like the fishing story. Yeah. You got that little 12-inch fish. By the time you get home, you had a 4-foot shark on the line.
Yeah, it's a good point. So
I want to tell you a quick story because this has stuck with me my whole life. And I remember this as a young kid. I was in the 4th grade, Dave, and I went out. I left the classroom to get a drink at the Bubbler, and there was a whole bunch of kids in line, 4th graders, 2nd graders, 3rd graders, and I was behind, or I was in front of a girl who actually lives down the street from me still, and I got some water, I looked at her, I said hi, and I walked back into my classroom, and there was about 4 other kids in line getting some water at the Bubbler. 5 minutes later, the principal comes into the classroom with the young girl, she was like a 2nd grader, and the principal says, "Which one of the students in this classroom pushed you down?" And she picked me. It was that guy right there. She said that I pushed her down, that I cut her in line at the Bubbler, and I pushed her, and she fell and hurt her head, and she went crying to the principal, and she said, "I know who it was. He went into such and such a classroom. He's a 4th grader." And she identified me, Dave.
Wow.
I didn't touch her, and I was horrified. I got suspended from school for a day. My mother had to come in. We had to have a meeting with my mother and her mother. I had to apologize to her.
You had to apologize for something you didn't do?
I didn't do it, Dave. The girl picked me out of a lineup of other 4th graders.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, believe women. So why'd you shove her?
I didn't shove her. And to this day, I'm like, I remember that.
Why do you think she did it?
Knowing
what you know now.
I think just a 2nd grader, there's a bunch of kids in line. I'm probably just the face she recognized, and she must have said, "Oh, it must have been that guy."
She must have recognized you when you shoved her down.
Yeah.
Knocked her on the ground.
Before she went unconscious, she saw my face. So that goes to the age of a witness.
Did you cut her?
What's that?
Did you cut in line?
No, she was behind me. The reason why I remember it so clearly is because to this day, she lives 5 or 6 houses down the street.
5 or 6
she still lives there.
Every time she sees you, she says to her grandchildren, she goes, that's the man.
That's the guy.
When I was in elementary school.
And that's one of the main issues with eyewitness identification is the age of a witness.
Okay.
Now, obviously, a 25-year-old, not under duress, would probably be a good eyewitness.
Yeah.
But would a 5-year-old be a good eyewitness?
Would a 63-year-old? No.
Yeah, with bad eyesight?
Well, not just bad
Look at those
eyesight,
Coke.
but
Look at Dave if you don't know Dave, he has Coke bottle glasses about 3 inches thick.
3 inches thick. My vision is fine. The only problem with me is if the crime, here's what I think. If a crime was committed and I could stay in that room until the trial, I would remember everything that happened.
Oh, absolutely.
But if I leave that room, my memory is wiped out and I've got to start again on a whole new set of facts.
Yeah, so age is a huge factor, whether it be a really young age or a very old age.
Right.
And then you brought this up earlier, racism. People may stereotype or profile someone. If the cops say, hey, did you see someone who stole a car? So you may say, well, oh, gee, I saw a Hispanic kid run right by me. And then 5 minutes later, I hear a smash and then a car screeching out of the area. So being racist, having a racist stereotype that Hispanics steal cars, I might say, well, I saw a kid that looked like A, B, C, and D.
Yeah.
The cops grab someone like that, and they might try to charge that kid with a crime based on the eyewitness who has some racism in him or her.
And misidentified. The Italian kid running by him he's 13, he's got facial hair, full facial hair.
Italian kid.
And he thinks he looks he
might be Hispanic.
He must be Hispanic. He's looking at the facial hair. But as you know, and I know, plenty of 12-year-old Italian kids have got
so racial prejudice.
Well, I don't know. Here's a question. I mean, so you think it's racial prejudice?
It could be in some cases.
The story that I read, which was years ago, so maybe I didn't have it right, but I don't think they mentioned racism as the issue as much as it was just something, in the brainstem, kind of instinctual, that we just don't recognize people of other races as accurately as we recognize people of our race. And now we get to something else. The other one you got on every so often, maybe the police officer says, hey, did you see anybody running by here? Maybe somebody Hispanic?
Yeah. Sometimes cops get in their head that based on the crime, whether it be a stolen bike, a stolen car, a bank robbery, or something like that, a street cop who believes that he knows the people in the neighborhood, he knows in his mind there might be a certain type of person that would rob a bank or a certain type of person that would just walk into a convenience store and just jump over the counter and grab some scratch tickets or just grab money out of the cash register. And if that officer believes he knows that person and you're a witness, Dave, he may make suggestions to you. Well, was he a Caucasian male? Did he have a tattoo on his left forearm? Did he look like a bodybuilder? Did he look Irish to you? He might start suggesting things to you, and you might say, well, yeah, he might have had a tattoo. Yeah, he had a, one of those those tank tops. What do they call them?
Huh? Wife beaters.
Yeah, wife beaters. Did he have a wife beater tank top on? Well, as a matter of fact, he did.
So would a cop be that specific about it? Or would he say?
I've seen it happen on occasion.
Okay.
And it's not a good thing because the cop gets in his or her head. I just saw the guy who just got out of jail. I just saw him walking down the street about a quarter mile from here, and he was walking in the direction of the convenience store, and then 5 minutes later, the convenience store gets robbed, and this guy just got out of jail for robbing stores. So he sees you as the witness, and then now he starts making suggestions. Did he have a pair of black and white Nike sneakers on? Because the cop remembers seeing the guy down the street, and you might...
And I'm correct to say this, that if you're a good criminal defense attorney, you're going to take that that discussion with the cop, you're going to make it an issue if you can, and you're going to basically eliminate that eyewitness.
Because it was suggestive.
Because it was well, if you're saying, was he wearing a wife beater, and was he this and was he that? Yeah.
Absolutely. It happens. It shouldn't happen.
Well, here's the thing. Is the cop jumping to conclusions, or is the cop playing the percentages?
He's probably playing the percentages, and I can give you a quick story.
Yep.
Sunday morning, I saw a kid probably a mile from a crime scene that within 5 minutes I was going to get a call to go to a certain crime scene. And I saw a kid that I knew. All right, 15, 16-year-old kid, about 5'7", 120 pounds, black hair. It was like 8 in the morning. He's walking. All right, so I have that in my head.
Yeah, on a Sunday, which is...
On a Sunday. Anything happens on a Sunday between 6 in the morning and 9 in the morning is a shit show.
Yeah.
So it's like about, like I said, around 8 in the morning, we get a call for a lady who said that a young kid just broke into her apartment, jumped into her bed, and fondled her. And I'm like, oh my God, that makes no sense at all. And she gives the address, and I'm like, oh my God, I know that the kid that I just saw hangs out at that address because his best friend lives at that address. It's a 3-family apartment. So I get to the apartment, we take the report. She's all nervous. She's crying. Someone breaks into her apartment. She's asleep, and she looks in her bed, and there's this kid, 15, 16-year-old kid. She describes him exactly to the kid that I saw, like I said, about a mile from that apartment.
Okay.
All right, so he very easily could have broken into the house, gone into her bedroom, fondled her, and ran and went to his house. By the time I saw him, like I said, 15 minutes had gone by. So in my head, what am I thinking? I'm thinking that's the kid who did it.
Well, he seems pretty clear that that's the kid.
Yeah, absolutely. In my head, I'm clear.
Yeah.
But you want to know what happened? It's a 3-story apartment. On the 3rd floor, there was a kid hanging out with his father, 12-year-old kid from New Hampshire. Looked exactly like the kid that I saw that I knew. And that kid had walked out of his father's apartment, opened the lady's door who lived, like a floor below him, and walked into her bedroom and jumped into the bed. The kid was a maniac.
Wow.
And it wasn't the kid that I thought, because I went and I got the kid. I brought him back to the scene of the crime. We had him in the cruiser, and she was going to identify him. And what happens? This guy walks downstairs with the kid that actually did it, and was taking him back to New Hampshire. And the lady goes, "That's the kid right there." And I go, "Well, I got a kid in the cop car that I think did it." You see?
Wow.
That happens.
And did she, when she looked at the other kid, the kid that you had?
It all happened simultaneous. By the time I pulled up,
that's so fortunate.
And she was out front,
everybody.
And then
Especially
he
the
walked
kid.
down the it all happened within seconds of each other.
This kid that in your squad car,
Yep.
he hung around at this address.
He hung around at the address.
He
was a known criminal,
Did he
but
hang-
he wasn't
did he-
that type of criminal, just a nitwit criminal.
Yeah. And did he hang around with her family?
He hung around with another kid who lived on like the 1st floor.
So triple decker or something.
Yeah, triple decker, yeah.
Wow.
Wrong
That's
place at
a
the
wild
wrong time for him. He could have been, she might have picked him right out because they looked very similar. Other than being a couple of years older, they looked extremely similar.
That's
So there you go. So I've done it myself, unfortunately. But you learn from that. You learn from that, and you try not to make that mistake again. You try not to have a stereotype or a focus that I know they did it. You don't know they did it until you find out who did it.
Yeah.
You don't know they
Even
did
if
it.
something looks like it's like something, it could be something else.
Absolutely.
We've all learned that from my cousin Vinny.
There you go.
All right.
And you get the media. It's all over the newspaper. The media is convicting people. So if you were a witness, Dave, and you got home and you didn't tell the cops that you saw something, and you watch the news at 5:00 and everyone's saying that this guy did it or that guy did it, and you're like, "Gee, I saw that guy," and now you're going to be a witness. But the media knows nothing. The media just makes up their own mind.
Oh my God.
They're just as bad as sometimes cops going rogue.
I'm going to bring some media people here one of these days to talk about this. I don't think crime and grime reporters, I think they're pretty much, if anything, they lean.
Well, they're more responsible and just.
I think they try to be responsible because they can be sued, and they're also more responsible because they can be sued. And I also think they I think they lean a little on the cop side. Maybe we'll talk to a few. I'll try and get a couple in here.
And now the last one is like,
let me hear this. There's a
David.
little story about being on TV. Because you're
right.
saying people want to be on TV. There was a stabbing in Lynn, and I went to cover it.
Hold on. If you don't know Lynn, that's not hard to believe. There's a stabbing there probably 3 times a week. Go ahead, Dave.
Well, it was right in front of the school. It was an athlete from the school. He was a minor. He was like the star. He was a star athlete from the school. He got stabbed. So I'm going down there. I've got my reporter's notebook and me. That's all I've got. No photographer, nobody but me. And I stopped to talk to a kid, and we're talking, and he's just, a person who heard about it or whatever. I don't even remember what he said. But then he finishes it up by looking at me and saying, "Am I going to be on TV?"
There you go. Was he the kid who did it?
I don't know. But I said to him, I said, do you see a camera here? Do you see a camera? Do you see a TV camera?
He doesn't want to be on TV because he's probably wanted somewhere else. He's a Lynn kid. They're all wanted.
He wanted to. I left there thinking this kid is not the smartest kid in the world.
Yeah.
But it was just a funny thing. But yeah, everybody loves to be on TV.
Oh yeah.
Everybody loves to be on TV. What else?
No, the last one would be environmental factors. Obviously, nice sunny day, you're going to have a clear view. Midnight, you're not going to have a clear view. Did the crime happen 10 feet in front of you, or did it happen 50 feet from you? So those factors will determine how good or how accurate a witness is going to be. And as a police officer, you have to know how far away were you when you saw this person rob the store. Oh, geez, I was 2 feet away. All right, that's pretty good. Oh, well, I was 30 feet down the street and I saw out of the corner of my eye what I thought to be a gun. I mean, how accurate is that going to be?
Right.
And like I said, 8 a.m, sunny day, very accurate. Midnight, not so accurate. Unless you got night vision like a raccoon, Dave.
I got to tell you, even during the day, I could see a lot of things going wrong with an eyewitness identification based on environmental factors. A bright day, sun in your eyes.
Absolutely.
How many times do you have people who they put their blinker on and they wind up still getting into a car accident because either they put it on too early and they meet to turn on the second right, and meanwhile somebody pulls out thinking
that sounds like right. You, Dave, trying to pass them on the left.
It's on my that's happened.
It's on your driving record, is it? Passing on the left.
My driving record is fine, but I have seen it happen. And the other one is when you get the glare. Somebody's got glare off the back, and you've got your blinker on, and then nobody's and you don't see the blinker.
It's the same thing. Yeah. Walking down the street, the sun's in your eyes,
and or whatever. But you're right. I think for all these things. So let me ask you this: eyewitness identification is a huge factor in convictions.
Absolutely, it is.
So if it's not,
there's a couple of stories we're gonna hit in about 5 minutes here,
and we're going to talk about how. All right, we're going to talk about this, but here's the question. If with all these studies that show how undependable eyewitnesses are, why are they still such a strong factor?
There's a lot of states out there, a lot of jurisdictions that still give it a lot of weight. And if you look historically at a lot of people who have been, by the Innocence Project, who've been found to be not guilty through DNA or through fingerprints or through better police procedure 20 years later, and the big factor on their conviction has been the eyewitness is the reason why the jury would be swayed one way or the other. It seems like when someone goes up in court and says, pick out the person who stabbed your father, and they look and they see the guy sitting right next to his attorney, that's the guy.
Right.
Him right there. Johnny Smith stabbed my father. I saw him. I was 5 feet away. I know him. It's him. To me, that's so believable. How can you refute that? But you don't. There's so many other factors that come into play.
And of course, that person has been prepped by the DA.
Yep.
Just as the witnesses for the defense have been prepped by the defense, and they've said no room for ambiguity. You have to be absolutely certain. You have to tell the jury you're absolutely certain.
I've gone to domestic calls where the wife has said, my husband hit me, my boyfriend hit me. And little did we know that she was just a vindictive maniac making everything up. But they are very believable. They're crying. They're all out of control. They're in the corner.
Crying
Woe is me. The crying always works.
Yeah.
So it's very hard. Most humans are not good lie detectors. We can't determine whether someone's telling the truth. It's very difficult. And many criminals can put you in a situation where they are so believable, they're so cunning, they're so manipulative, you actually feel bad for them, but when in fact you're feeling bad for the actual bad guy. That's how that works, unfortunately.
Let's talk about the procedure. Cops respond to a crime scene that has a witness or witnesses, and first thing they do, I would think, is they separate them.
If you go to a crime scene where someone was stabbed, person on the ground being stabbed or has been stabbed, you'll give medical attention. If there's a couple of witnesses, then each officer will interview one of the witnesses independently, because you don't want them to kind of talk amongst each other to kind of get their stories together. Witness A will talk to cop A, and they have a story. Witness B will talk with cop B. They'll have a story. Then the two cops get together and say, what did your witness say? What did your witness say? And hopefully the witness's story is relatively the same, and they come up with either the same identification or the same person, especially if they know who the bad guy is. Mm-hmm. So that right there, two independent witnesses speaking independently with other officers usually works out pretty good.
All right. Let me ask you this question. You're Officer A, I'm Officer B. My witness says one thing, your witness says something slightly different. Do you come and do you interview my witness?
Well, no, at that point when you have two witnesses saying two different things, now you have to kind of regroup a little bit and get back to the station and try to figure out why each witness is saying something different. Now is something going on there? Is one witness looking to cover for someone who did the crime and try to blame the crime on someone else? There's a lot of things that could happen with that. You really have to slow things down a little bit and really start doing an investigation in a different direction now. Right. But if you do get a good witness, if they give you a exact identification or if they know the person, basically what you'll do, especially in a crime scene like that, a stabbing, you'll put a bolo out. Be on the lookout.
Okay.
Based on the witness identification, and hopefully that person will either be picked up by a police officer in the area or at some point later down the line would be brought in for questioning based on the eyewitness identification. And you can do, like I said, you can do that done right on scene. And what we did with the young kid that I thought had fondled the lady in her bed, we brought the kid back to the scene. It's like a bring back or a show up. Bring him back in a cruiser, and then you have the kid seated in the back of the cruiser. You roll the window down, and the victim walks up and looks into the cruiser. The cop says, is that the guy that did it? And she says, or he says, either yes or no. So that can be very suggestive, though. But go ahead.
Right. Yeah. Very suggestive.
Very suggestive. This is the kid we picked out.
So we picked up this guy. We're pretty sure he did it. What do you think?
Yeah.
What about the perp's rights or the alleged perp's rights? I mean, you picked up this kid. Did you say to him, I'm going to bring you by the house to have somebody look at you, or did you say, we're just going to take a little ride? Well,
yeah, no, you're going to have to explain, hey, this is what's going on. We had an incident that happened. They described it as a Caucasian male with a red sweatsuit on and red Nike sneakers and yellow hair with a piercing through the nose. And that's who I got in the back of my car.
Why do you have to describe me like that to all of our listeners?
Yeah, you're going to have to let the person know what's going on to a certain extent. And we're bringing you back. You're in the back of the cruiser and someone's going to take a look at you.
Okay. All right.
Sometimes
so
people will run.
Can I refuse? Can I say not without my lawyer?
No, you really can't say that. No.
Okay.
I mean, is that something down the road that a lawyer
will pick on? Yes.
Will pick on and try to.
At that point, you can't. You
have it excluded as evidence.
So you can run, or you can comply.
You can run. Yeah, you can run. Doesn't mean you're guilty. You're just running.
Right.
I've never had anyone really try to run. A lot of times they were caught so close to the scene. You know, it was one of those situations where, other than the young kid that I talked about earlier, most of them were pretty accurate. A guy running down the street with blood all over him and a hammer in his hand. He's probably pretty much the kid who smashed his friend in the head.
You with the chainsaw. Slow down. Yeah. So to be a thing where, okay, and how many lineups have you done?
Oh, I used to do all the photo arrays. I was the computer guy for photo arrays.
Okay.
The photo array is 8 photos. And let's say a lady says she's out jogging and some guy exposed himself to her. And what's the description? Well, in his late 50s, early 60s, about 6 feet, maybe 250, wears glasses, grayish hair, receding hairline, no facial hair, sideburns probably 2 inches below the earline. So what we would do is we would get 8 photos that looked very similar to her description, meaning if she says Caucasian male with glasses, grayish hair, we get 8 Caucasian males with glasses and grayish hair from photos, whether they're arrest photos or registry photos or something off of Facebook, and we put them all together and they have to look relatively similar. You can't say Caucasian male and put 4 Caucasian males in there and then put 4 Hispanic males in there.
Why not?
Well, because now you're really focusing on the Caucasian aspect. And if she says an earring, you have to find guys with earrings. Or what I used to do is would Photoshop an earring into someone's ear.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah, because
an earring
everyone
you
has to
take
have an earring.
Well, it's like glasses. I mean, if you change the look of your glasses, you can change the look of your face.
Absolutely. But there's a lot of things with photo arrays. The backgrounds all have to be the same color. They have to be kind of cropped the same. A very good defense attorney will look at a photo array and pick out a lot of imperfections on colors and the glasses and the colors of hair and earrings and no earrings and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Based on the person you're looking for. So any inconsistency on a photo array, a lot of times that photo array will get thrown out.
All right. Anyway, so
we got a couple of crazy cases here. We have 2 cases. Yes. Did you read them, Dave? I sent them to you.
Are they better than the hockey bag?
Well, that hockey bag is insane.
That's great. We got to follow that.
We got to follow that. I have no clue what's going on with that. Well, yeah. I mean, there was a situation probably around 10 years ago. Lydell Grant. He was sentenced to life in prison for a death outside of a Houston nightclub, and there were 6 eyewitnesses. 6 eyewitnesses, and based on 6 eyewitness testimony, he was convicted and sent to jail. However, Innocence Project comes through a few years later, and based on DNA evidence and based on other information that they uncovered, it was found out that he didn't do it, and there was another guy, Jamerico Carter, who was actually the person who did it.
Right. And they flipped the case.
But
even flipping the case was not easy.
It wasn't easy because the court down there still didn't believe it, even though you had the DNA evidence. They had to kind of speak to the 6 eyewitnesses, and after a year of going through all that, they finally flipped the case. But it's insane. 6 people. And if you go to the website where I found that story, they had they had the guy who was convicted, Lydell Grant, and then they had Jamerico Carter, and they had photos right next to each other. And they were somewhat similar. The photos were kind of similar.
Well, that's the thing. You can look alike. You could just look alike. I mean, you go to Ireland. Everybody in Ireland
looks like Dave Rattigan.
Looks like me or Paul Gilligan. I once had Paul Gilligan. He's a comedian in Boston. Great comedian, great guy, not a criminal. But I saw him. He was in the section ahead of me at the Red Sox game. He turns. He's looking backwards behind me. And I'm like, that guy looks just like Paul Gilligan. And I sat and I watched him for like 5 minutes. And then finally it dawned on me, that was Paul Gilligan.
There you go.
But if we dropped the 2 of us into the middle of Ireland, we would blend right in except for our clothing.
Yeah, so unfortunately for this Lydell Grant individual, 6 people thought it was him, but it wasn't him.
That's amazing.
That's weird. 6 people all pick you out of a lineup and say that you're the guy who did it.
You know something? I can see it happening. And with what you've told me here and what I've seen in the past, I can see it happening even more so.
And the next one.
I love this case. Yeah. I wasn't even there. The guy wasn't even there. They still wanted to. Go ahead. Go ahead.
He wasn't
go ahead.
even there. So in 2015, Arthur Jones was charged by Hattiesburg police for the murder he didn't commit. And the messed up thing about it is this is like in Biloxi, Mississippi. He had evidence, video evidence, that he wasn't even near the crime scene.
Yeah.
And they still convicted him based on an eyewitness test. Well, let me put it this way. They still charged him. He went to trial and everything was dropped. But he was still, even though they had that evidence, that video evidence that he wasn't there, they still had an eyewitness, and he went through the process. He was in jail. I don't know how long he was in jail for. He was probably in jail for around a year, and then ultimately they dropped the charges. But wouldn't you think that if you had evidence that he's in a nightclub or in a restaurant 20 miles away at the time of the murder, that the cops would say, that sounds logical?
Well, here's the other thing. In 2015, we didn't have the technology that we do now.
Well, it was still good back then.
But what I'm saying is you could do it now where you could fake a timestamp on a video.
Oh, absolutely.
On a security video in an hour away. And you can get away with this now.
Yep.
I mean, you could actually plan it.
Because the average person 10 years ago didn't really know how to use video enhancement software.
Right.
Nowadays, if you grab a hold of that video, you can change a lot of things on it.
We got to do it.
We got to try it.
We got to try it. So how did this, you don't know the kind of video evidence he had. You just know that there was video evidence, right?
There was video evidence that he was at another location
That's amazing.
At the time. But however, there was also an eyewitness that said he did it.
And so what they were saying, I guess, on the prosecution side is this wasn't him in the other video. This was him in the flesh.
Yeah.
And the guy in the video just happened to look like him. But of course, then you say, well, how would you know to point anybody in the direction of here's where you can get the video? That's
and it also goes to law enforcement and goes to the court, the prosecutor, who has in their head that, we have an eyewitness, and they focus on that, and they don't look outside the box. They looked in a tunnel vision type way, and they focus on whatever the eyewitness says, and that's what they believe, and they don't look at any other alternative. So that goes back to the bias of law enforcement.
That's wild.
I think that it all the initial investigation by an officer on scene, whether it be a officer who's been on the police department for a year or a officer who's been on for 20 years, that initial investigation usually will set everything in motion on witnesses, evidence, and the theory of what may have happened. So if you have an officer who may have a racial bias, who may be inexperienced, who may wrongly believe that he knows who did it.
Right.
All right, because he's focused just on one person, because he can't see the whole picture.
Yep.
If you don't get rid of that attitude, then this will always continue to happen, because the human factor will always, in law enforcement, will always be incorrect in some instances, and the wrong guy is going to get convicted. So Rattigan, you made it 63 years, brother, but you could be in the wrong place at the wrong time tonight, picking up your Cialis from CVS, and there's a robbery, and they say, that's the guy who did it, baby. I know Rattigan. He was my teacher.
It was somebody whose blood was clearly pumping through his veins. Oh, that's good. That's a happy note.
But no, the thing you got now is DNA evidence. You can always use DNA evidence to try to...
Is DNA evidence, I mean, we see the television shows, it's not as strong as people would have.
Well, you've made a joke on the podcast before, you're going to sell your blood or your hair and drop it at a crime scene.
I got to start doing that. I'm not going to drop it. I'm going to give it to people to drop at the crime scene.
Give it to criminals, yeah.
And then when they bring me in, I'll say, what'd the guy look like? And they'll say, we don't want to say that he's Irish, but he's got a round face and he's white. All right, so
in closing, you got the DNA evidence, you get the other physical evidence that can kind of either refute or corroborate eyewitness testimony, which is prints, video, someone actually knowing the perpetrator. I know him. I went to school with him. He's my brother. He's my ex-boyfriend. And then, what they have out there is they have the Innocence Project, and they do a great job trying to find inconsistencies in cases and trying to get wrongfully convicted people out of jail for the right reasons, not the wrong reasons.
Good. So that's it for today?
That's it, Dave. Eyewitness testimony isn't what you think it is, brother.
Oh, it's exactly what I think it is. It's exactly what I think it is. Anyway, that's it for Inside the Line. Real Stories by Real Cops. I'm Dave Rattigan. That's Dale Lawrence. We wanted to remind you, InsideTheLine.org is our website. And please share us. We're looking to bring more screwy stories to you, including this one about the hockey bag in New York. Dale, thanks very much. Thanks to you listeners for tuning in. See you next time.